Hello and welcome back to A Drunk History of Middle-earth. This is a show where we take the legendarium created by J.R.R. Tolkien and have a good, simple, wholesome chat about it. Sometimes it's a drunk person, me, trying to explain stories or events, and sometimes it's breaking down the stories and concepts as if we're talking to a drunk person. I'm Chris, I'm an avid Tolkien nerd, I'm still learning and realising how much I actually don't know. And joining me is your co-host and my lovely wife Rebecca. Do you want to say hello?
Hello, I'm Rebecca, a complete novice to all things Tolkien and nerdy in general. Although now I've watched all 3 films, extended editions, and can now confirm that I have been converted to the religion headed by Elrond Tubbard.
Long may he live. Right.
Zoltan.
That's the intro sorted. Let's get into today's episode. Hello, Rebecca. It's been a while.
Yeah, and I feel like you've transformed into a beautiful butterfly.
It's been 2. I think we missed a week, didn't we? Because I've been ill. I've had COVID, and we've only missed a week, but it feels a lot longer, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels like a lifetime. But I think that's because I've had the child in your illness.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's felt like an eternity for me.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so we're recording this the day before my 30th birthday.
Be old.
I know I'm old. I also tried to go out for my first run since COVID today, and you had to come and pick me up because I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
COVID's no joke, folks. It's no jokes. But for the literally ones of people who listened to the last episode about the
the single digit.
The 7 people from Denmark who listened to the last episode, we talked about the Ainulindale and the creation of the universe and Eru. So what can you remember from the last episode?
Why would you put me on the spot like that? Oh, jeez. Right, so I can't remember any of the names, so we're just going to go with...
Do you remember what God's called? 3 letters.
Ra.
No, that's the Egyptian god of the sun.
Yeah, but it's close, isn't it? Eru or something.
Eru, yeah, okay, yeah, good.
Right, okay, so Eru, and then there's the Valar.
Yes.
And the Maiar.
But you're getting that confused with the Maiar and the Ainur.
They're the same thing.
Yeah, they're the
same thing.
Yeah, the combined category is called Ainur.
And they all have different skills.
Yeah.
And practice. So, Eru, to create the universe, he got them all to sing a lovely song, and they were singing this great song. But is it Morgoth?
He's not Morgoth yet, but that is his name. He's Melkor at the moment.
Melkor is a dick. So he gets a flick because he sings a crap song and veers from what the song is meant to be. Because he already has loads of skills and, it's boring, this song for him. And this then makes Eru very unhappy. So another song is sang over it, and which is a sad song, and this is what creates the universe. And then Eru's like, does anyone fancy chilling on Earth or whatever planet it is? And some of them go down, and Melkor joins and decides to do loads of mad shit. Is that it?
Broad strokes, yes. There is music, there is discord, and we ended the episode with Eru saying, Ea, let these things be, or let this thing be, and the universe being created. And Eru saying, but if you want to know more about the Ainulindale and the creation of the universe itself and the spirits, go back and listen to our last episode, which is just called the Ainulindale, I think. I think it's called Eru Creation and the Ainulindale. But you'll be able to find it if you listen to this podcast. Obviously, you'll be able to see the other episodes. So we're going to pick up today where we left off the last episode. So Eru has just created the universe, and he says, "Ea, let these things be." And he says to the Ainur, "You can descend into Ea, but the stipulation is, if you enter the universe, you are there until the end. You are bound to the universe." And the Valar go along with lots of Maya. They descend into Ea, and they know that their mission is to create. So do you remember that Eru showed them that vision of what the universe was to be and creation, and he stopped it before the end.
Stopped it.
But they saw these beautiful things.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, some of the Ainur were very dismayed and upset when they first got into the universe because
Being misled.
Not really, but they were shown it as it should be.
They were sold a Spanish
villa. And they got there and it was a construction site.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much, because some of the Ainur were dismayed because it was dark and silent. It was nothing like the vision that Eru had showed them. But some of them, the Valar chief among them, understood that this was the starting point. That to get to the beautiful creation of Earth, like, you know, as we are, they needed to work. So the Ainur began to create, and the universe, they worked and are created for time uncounted. So an important thing to note at this point is time hasn't started yet. Like, the concept of time doesn't really start for quite a while yet. So we're still, like, well before that. It's like with a lot of creation myths, though, isn't it? Like, we're getting into the bones of the creation myth now, like, because, you know, it could be thousands, maybe millions of years as the Ainur began to toil, and they made what would come to be called Arda, which is the planet that we live on. Well, if we take it as a fictional history, it's Earth. And the ones who did the most here was Manwë, Aule, and Ulmo. And do you recognise those names as the
Manwë,
three? Yeah. So Manwë is King of the Winds. He's Melkor's brother, essentially. So Eru thinks of the Valar slightly differently, some of them, and he thinks of Manwë and Melkor as brothers. Then there's Ulmo, who's the Valar of the seas. Elmo, god of the seas. And Aule, the smith, who will go on to create the dwarfs. Obviously, he's not there yet, but and his wife Yavanna, the one who creates the Ents, and she plays a big part in this. Towards the end of this episode, we'll see that she plays a big part in this. And of course, Melkor was there as well, and he meddled, and he messed, and he fucked things up. And if he could turn something to his design, he would. He even started lots of fires. Which weird that, like, Tolkien pointed that out, but yeah, he was basically like, yeah, and he set fires.
I'm a fire starter.
Yeah, he's a twisted fire starter. It's like Peep Show when they burn the barn down.
Yeah.
Like Ramadan, Dan's barn gets burned down. Melkor is Mark, Jeremy, and Ian.
He's an arsonist.
Ian Chapman. Yeah, but it's just, again, I keep coming back to this thing of, like, having a toddler following you around while you're doing stuff and then just fucking it up straight away. Maybe that it's just our experiences colouring us, I think. But surprisingly, Melkor, if you think of him as a toddler, had entered the mine stage and tried to claim Arda as his own. He was like, mine. Surprisingly, Manwë told him to fuck off because it was for everyone, and Melkor went off in a sulk.
I'm familiar with this.
Yeah, he twisted, but they didn't relent, and he went off and sulked. And he went off. So this is the point where Arda's been made now. A question for you is, how do you imagine the spirits at this point?
Just like giants.
Yeah.
Just plodding about. Because I've got to, like, imagine a physical. Instead of, like, wispy things.
Well, that's interesting because it is at this point that the Valar choose their forms. So before this, they didn't really have forms. Some became men, some became women. But the important thing to remember with Valar is their forms are like clothes for us. Like, just because we take our clothes off doesn't mean we stop being people. The things we do when we take our clothes off might make us stop being people. But
I was going to say, speak for yourself.
but when the Valar aren't wearing their forms, even the elves can't perceive them. They become formless. Like they become But so they can cloak themselves and make themselves look like people or whatever. Or like Ulmo might make himself look like a giant man made out of swirling ocean, or Manwë might be like a tornado with eyes or something. But they can also clothe themselves in their own thoughts and concepts, which I find eldritch as fuck. So imagine you meet Melkor. You'd be meeting potentially, he'd look like the very concept of terror itself, which is just like blow your fucking mind.
Yeah, I'll just not think about that.
Well, imagine, like, could you imagine meeting something that's the concept of the wind itself, and that's the form it takes? Like,
no, it's too confusing. So I'm just gonna stick with giants plodding about. Okay.
yeah, well, they are depicted like that a lot of the time. To be fair, there's a very good. There's one of on the Tolkien Gateway of, I think it's Ulmo, and it looks like that. Or no, actually, I think it's Manwë, and it's a giant storm clouds, but in the shape of a man, and it's got like lightning crackling through him and stuff like that, and it shows like something in his hand, and it's while they're creating the earth, which is pretty fucking cool. Melkor's form, however, is slightly more limited than the rest of them, because he's such a jealous little bitch and so full of malice that when he tries to copy what the other Valar are doing, it's reflected in how he looks. Like he's ruining it for himself. Do you know, like spiteful, jealous people tend to ruin it for themselves.
Yeah.
It's no different here.
Makes him ugly.
Yeah, exactly. He's so jealous and spiteful that it's reflected just in his form.
Yeah.
Which would, again, it still would make him absolutely terrifying to encounter. I imagine it is very, very eldritch in the sense that it'd probably drive you mad to look at him, or kill you outright. Although there is a lot of men and elves who go on to face him and see him face to face, and they don't really go mad. But I just love my Lovecraftian shit, to be honest. But as we go on with the story, the Valar, as you'd imagine, would have a lot of servants, like not servants, or like other Maiar who are aligned to their causes. So, for example, I think Gandalf is a servant of Yavanna. Fuck knows. I know for a fact Saruman and Sauron both start, because they're both Maiar, they both start as servants of Aule. So they weren't evil in the beginning. They become perverted to another course. But so it's at this point that because these immortal spirits, so it's Saruman. I think his Maya name is Kurin, and Sauron's name is Mehron. So at this point in time, at the beginning of time, these two spirits that will go on to become Sauron and Saruman are servants of Aule. They're helping him build the worlds.
Okay.
So they're doing the cool shit. So they're not evil, but these Maiar help the Valar and achieve their goals and labours. This is a cool quote that I got from the Silmarillion. Do you know, when I was making notes, I was furiously making notes today just before tea.
Yeah.
And it said that Melkor descended to Arda in a form of terrible majesty and splendour. And imagine this one: like a mountain wading in the sea with his head above clouds, clad in ice and crowned with smoke and fire. It said his eyes burned with a fierce heat, but pierced like cold.
So it's just a complete mash of everything, and
it's trying to describe the limitless majesty of gods, essentially. Like, that's what they are, you know.
Yeah, but it's misplaced.
How so?
Because it's contradicting principles of like heat and cold and.
Oh right. It's like have you seen that Family Guy episode where Joe Swanson's son comes back from Iraq, but it turns out he's like he like a deserted, but he's saying, I wrote a lot of really deep poetry, and everyone's just like, yeah, all right then. And then he's like, I'll read it. And they're like, please don't read it. And he's like, no, I'll read it. And then Brian says, like, if I can guess one line, will you not read it? And he goes, well, I don't think you will. And he goes, does it say something like it burned like ice? It's that kind of like similar point, isn't it? Of like, you go for these. Is it juxtaposition, or you go for these opposing things? And
I want to say oxymoronic, but
yeah, kind of like.
I don't think that's right.
Well, an oxymoron is like a contradicting statement, isn't it? Like a straight circle, like a straight circle.
Yeah, I'm just flexing my intelligence there.
Well, it's immediately following a Family Guy joke, so I think I've brought the average down, if I'm honest.
Yeah, but you're remembering all these names of Lord of the Rings characters, so...
Yeah, and the average goes back up. But yeah, I love that. I wanted to quote that, because we don't do many quotes here, unless I'm die hard going for Samwise or Aragorn or Theoden. But yeah, it's just the way Tolkien described Melkor was pretty fucking spot on, like, and it always made me, like a mountain wading through the sea. It made me think for some reason of the monster from Cloverfield.
Never seen it.
Oh, have you not? That's pretty
wasted.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's a good film, but it's got a good visual in the third film where like a monster bursts its head above the clouds, and it's fucking terrifying. Anyway, but this is where the first war began between the Valar. So right, the Valar would build a mountain, and Melkor would smash it down. They'd make a valley, and he'd turn it up into a fucking mountain. They'd make a sea, he'd knock a hole in it and drain it. They'd make a plain, he'd fucking flood it. This carried on for ages and literally ages, but it's time uncounted, right? It could have been millions of years, it could have been a day. But slowly and surely, the Earth came to be. And it had places and features that weren't intended by the Valar. But something I think we might have mentioned briefly in the last episode that I want to point back out here is that when the music was being made, so there was the three themes, and Melkor fucked up the first one and Eru stopped it with his left hand, right?
Yeah.
And he smiled. And then the second time he held up his right hand, he looked pissed off. And at that point, Eru had said to Melkor that whatever you do will have its utmost source in me. So whatever Melkor does, or whatever he tries to do, whatever evil he tries to do, eventually will serve the purpose of Eru. And that, I think, is here. It's because he's trying to break Arda, and he's trying to mess the world up, and he's trying to fuck up the things that the Valar are doing. But slowly and surely, the world is still being created.
Yeah.
You've still got it. And so for a long time, Melkor had the upper hand in this war. It's easier to destroy than to build, right? Like, it's easier to knock something down than to build it back up, arguably.
Depends how strong you build the original thing.
Well, yeah, true.
If I build a Duplo tower with a good foundation, our child really struggles to knock it down. Whereas if I just build one brick on top of the other in a big wobbly tower,
right,
she just plows through it. So,
well, yeah, fair enough.
If they put in enough thought, it wouldn't have been broken that easily. He would have given up. He would have just gone in a strop.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that's their feeling.
We will see this though eventually, because Melkor will go on to build something that is quite hard to destroy. Not indestructible, but well, we'll get on to it in a bit. But this war went on for so long that eventually word got back up to the spirits outside of the universe, the ones that the ones that were still residing with Eru, and one of them was mighty and powerful, and he came into Ea, and he laughed so much and so loud that the whole earth was filled with the sound. Melkor promptly shit himself and ran. And he ran so far, he left the world entirely. He ran to the outer darkness. And
sorry, these concepts are really funny.
Yeah, so...
Because I'm just imagining, like, a toddler at this stage. Like...
Well, honestly, the way Lord of the Rings has been is probably going to get the same treatment as everything else. We'll have a fucking Disney Plus show of baby Valar for kids.
Yeah, well, I noticed when we're on Disney Plus that Star Wars have like a whole section of kids programs.
Yeah, I saw that. That was so weird.
And then there was one that was like about Grogu, but it looked like illustrations, like kids' illustrations. So that must be another kids program. But yeah, everything's got a kids program.
Yeah, fair dues. But Tulkas the Strong had arrived. Mightiest of the Valar, the hardest cunt. And Tulkas, it might be one of my favourite Valar because he's described as having a long beard and like long blonde braided hair. And I always imagine him as like a nicer Thor in temperament. Like, you know, like he laughs, he drinks, he fights kind of thing like that. And it's said that his weapons are his hands. And he loves to wrestle and contest of strength and stuff. So he puts the shits up Melkor because Melkor might be the most powerful.
Sounds very sexy. I mean, when you first said long hair, blonde hair, but then when you said Thor, oof.
He's just like basically. I always think of Tulkas as Viking AF.
Yeah.
Is how I imagine it. But he scared off Melkor, who ran beyond the circles of the world, and he went through the doors of night. Or the walls of night, and he basically fucked off into space. Like if you imagine the void as space or whatever, Melkor was like, "I'm out," and he went for so long that peace reigned, and we start to come to I think this is the beginning of the Spring of Arda, which is where the world is nice, and it was enough time gone that the other Valar could do their work because primarily at this point it had just been Ulmo, Manwë, and Aule. Ulmo had been taking care of the seas, Manwë like the mountains and like wind and shit like that, and Aule is of the stone of the earth and all that stuff. So you've got a couple of them that we went over last time. I won't go over them all again, but Yavanna, she planted all the seeds that she created. So there's the trees and plants and all the living things to grow. So all the beasts, plants, flowers, everything came forward. But for them to grow, they needed light. So they worked together. Yavanna asked very nicely, and Aule brought forth 2 lamps in the Middle Earth. Bigger than any mountain. These weren't just normal lamps. These were bigger than any mountain. These were going to light the whole world. So Aule fashioned them. Manwë blessed them. And Varda filled them with light. And you remember Varda, I mentioned, is Manwë's wife, and she's the one that the elves worship above all others because she's the one who creates the stars.
I'm just going to say yes because I'm getting lost with the names.
That's fine.
Well, I'm getting the concept.
I'm trying to introduce the names very slowly, so
they all sound the same to me, but that's fine.
Right, that's fine. So the 2 lamps, there was only 2 of them, were set in the far north of the world and the far south, right? The one in the far north was called Illuin. Illuin, I think. Well, I know what it's called, but I don't know how it's pronounced. And the one in the south was called Ormal. Now, their light met in the middle of the world, right? And mingled. And it was like the whole world, all the time, was like a bright noonday. Hence, it like being like spring sunlight.
Okay.
It's like the Spring of Arda. And I should probably mention at this point in time, the world did not look anything like it looks. Well, never mind now. It doesn't look anything like it looks at the time of Lord of the Rings. Because even prior to Lord of the Rings, I've mentioned a continent called Beleriand.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned the continent called Aman, where Valinor is. None of that exists yet. It's just Middle Earth, really. It's just one big continent. Like, we had Pangaea, or we had Pangaea.
Yeah.
So at this point, the world was 2 seas with mountains outside that circled the world, and a big continent sat in the middle. And in the middle of the continent was a giant lake, and in the middle of the giant lake was an island called Almaran, and it was the exact centermost point of the world, and it was where the light mingled. And that was where the Valar lived. So they lived in the Isle of Almaran, and everything was good. This is almost perfect. now. This is they've rested from their labours. They've created a world, and they just want to chill and wait for the children of Iluvatar to come.
I can feel there's something gonna shake this up.
Well, the world doesn't look like that now. So, you might be right.
It's like when I get woken up.
Yeah, something's wrong.
I'm like, oh no. Like, I could sleep my whole life away. And there's always something that has to wake me up.
Aye, well, not yet though, because it was all still good, right?
Okay.
And Manwë, for the first time, felt he could chill enough to hold a great feast. Tulkas and Aule were a bit wary of this because ever since they'd started working, they'd not stopped. Ever, right?
So they were like, oh,
yeah.
How are we going to chill?
But it must have seemed, oh, it's like your dad, yeah. Like,
yeah.
When will they ever fucking chill
might
out?
Die.
But it must have seemed a good idea because eventually they finally did it, right? I will point out again that Melkor, away out in the darkness, is a very jealous person. He covets, he's jealous, right? But he wasn't alone. He converted when they were singing the theme, and then slowly after it, he converted many spirits to his side, many Maiar. The Balrogs were some of them, Sauron, but there was others. There was lots of others. But some of these were spies that didn't let the other Valar know anything was wrong, or any of the other Maiar know that anything was wrong. And some of these spies were sent to the feast in Almoran to go and party and chill. Melkor got all of these spirits to his side and came back to Arda out of the darkness, but he stayed far in the north beyond it, so that the light of the Illuin, nobody could see past the light because it was so bright, so he was stood behind it.
Okay. And
he was looking at the Spring of Arda and he got jealous as fuck. He saw everybody having a great time out that. And at this feast, I mentioned it last time we recorded, but Tulkas wasn't already married when he came into Ea. He gets married, and he gets married to the other Valar, another Valar called Nessa. And Nessa is the sister of Oromir. And do you remember Oromir as the huntsman who rides the horse?
Yes.
And so he rides the I can't remember what he's called. I think it's called Nahara.
Is that like Shadowfax's great grandfather?
Yes, exactly. Well fucking remembered. Yes. So
that's my job done. See you later, guys.
Peace. But that's Oromir's sister is Nessa. And Nessa loves deer. And it's said that wherever Nessa walks, a whole train of deer will follow her. So basically, like when you go to Whitworth Hall and you have that bag of food,
yeah, and
they will just follow you and just try to eat it out of your hand. But Nessa's defining feature, it seems, is that she can run quicker than deer. And
so that works well, because if she fancies a break from them, she just
off. Yeah.
Does a quick run and she can at least get 5 or 10 minutes.
Aye. And it was at this feast that Nessa danced for them all, and everyone had a great time, and they got married. And eventually, Tulkas fell asleep. I just imagine he had it was like, do you know in the Norse mythology where Thor, he's tricked by the giants and he nearly drinks the oceans dry? There's do you remember the Norse myth where Thor's tricked by by one of the Jotun, who gives him 3 tasks that look really easy, and one of them is drain this horn of mead, wrestle this old woman, and pick up my cat. And it turns out that the giant has tricked Thor because the woman he tries to wrestle is the very concept of old age itself. The cat he tries to lift up is Jormungandr, the world serpent, and the horn is connected to the ocean. And so he fails at all 3 of them, and it's like, so I imagine that Tulkas tried to drink the oceans dry of mead and fell asleep. Is my long way of getting to that answer. But with Tulkas asleep, Melkor saw his chance. He came from the north, while everyone slept and entered Middle Earth, and he passed over the walls of night, which, as I mentioned, they're the boundary between the world. So at this point, the world's flat. By the way, it's not a round Earth yet. It's not round until Numenor really fucks up, and Eru gets involved. So that's way in the future.
Okay.
So it's men who cause the world to be round. At the moment, it's still flat. So Melkor approaches from the outside, passes over the walls of night, and begins building a giant fortress under... There's mountains in the north called the Iron Mountains. And I think in some form they still exist in the Third Age of Middle-earth when the Lord of the Rings movies and books happen. And the light of the lantern, Illuin, where it's weak and cold further north, is where he's building his citadel. And his citadel is called Autumno, and it's huge. It's fucking crazy huge, the size of it. And its other name is Udun, which... Does that ring a bell at all?
Yes.
From...
Udun's Book of Mysteries.
Fuck off. Do you remember when Gandalf stood on? Do you know when he stood on the bridge in Moria and he's the Balrog's facing him?
Yeah.
And he says, "It will not avail you, Flame of Udun." And do you remember me way back in the Fellowship episodes? I was saying that's Gandalf basically saying,
I know who you are.
I know who you are.
And I'm using your name.
Well,
as the power.
he's basically saying I know you're from hell. So that's what Autumno is essentially. It's it's got pits of fire. It's essentially hell.
Okay.
Melkor's built hell. Autumno is also, we might come to this, but it's also where the first elves get carried off to when they awaken, because Melkor, spoiler alert, kidnaps elves and twists them into orcs. The first orcs were... There's some argument amongst Tolkien people about... Because Tolkien himself could never really decide on the origins of orcs and what it meant for them. But one of the prevailing ones is that this is where they came from, is that Melkor twisted them into orcs. Because, again, evil can't create, it can only twist and corrupt, right?
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, up until Autumno's built, this is called the Spring of Arda. The world's new and lovely and just joyous, right? But now it's marred. Arda is now marred because of Melkor's influence. So when he's building Autumno, his evil and sickness spreads out. So it becomes festering breeding places for flies. The waters become poisoned near Autumno. Beasts become monstrous and green things will become rotten and sick. And a passage that I found amazing that I read today is that it is at this time that beasts become monsters of horn and ivory, which made me laugh thinking that Tolkien just really fucking hated elephants. It was just yeah, and fucking elephants as well. They're creatures of Morgoth. But we see Oliphant.
Is that why we have those giant Oliphants?
Well, I was going to say the Mumakil.
That makes sense now.
But yeah, so apparently they first came about from Melkor's fuckery, which I never thought of elephants as evil creatures, but here we are. But with this all happening, the Valar now knew something was up, right? And they started to look for Melkor, the bastard. However, he had become confident in his strength at this point, and he attacked first. And what he did was he attacked the two lamps, Illuin in the north and Ormal in the south, and he broke them. And because they're bigger than mountains, it starts ripping up the earth. He's really fucking wrecking the earth now. He broke them both and he threw Middle-earth into darkness. Now, this is a darkness that the elves will start to wake up under, essentially. But that's not for a while yet. And we can't forget the level of power we're dealing with. Because, I'm giving them names and it sounds like, it's just people fighting and what have you. But the fighting of the Valar now, and of them fighting Melkor and Melkor fighting them, it is wrecking the world. It's destroying the earth. Seas rise up, mountains are shattered, volcanoes, tsunamis, floods, everything. It's pretty much the end of the world as it was. And all from the power of the Valar fighting. So it's not just Melkor destroying it, it's the Valar fighting back that's causing these things as well as him ripping up mountains and what have you. So from this, the shape of the world itself was broken and changed, and never again would it be restored to how the Valar had made it, and perfectly symmetrical and perfect in their eyes. But in the confusion, and now the darkness and the fighting, surprise, surprise, Melkor became afraid again. He started all this, and now he's getting fucking scared again. Because the power of the Valar were unleashed against him. So the two that I mentioned is that Manwë's voice, the wind roars with Manwë's voice, and the ground itself shakes with the footfalls of Tulkas as he's looking for him and chasing him. And luckily for Melkor, he gets to Autumnal first before they can find him, and he hides in the deepest bowel of the earth. Because he builds Autumnal, it goes down, right? It's like hell, it goes down underground. And he was pretty safe there. Like I said, so you were saying if you build something well enough, it's hard to destroy, right?
Yeah.
This is where we come back to it. It was pretty safe there. He was, because it was huge and it was fortified. Like, it was massive. But the Valar are using most of their power to stop the world from being destroyed. So they can't use their full power, because if they do, like...
If they try to destroy his Holden, they'll destroy the world as well.
Oh, yeah, so like it's their attention's all completely divided on fixing and restoring and stopping the world. Like, so they're like, they might be trying to break down a gate, but with 90% of their mind, they're holding back a tsunami, while like Ulmo digs Aule digs a deep. So Ulmo might be holding back a tsunami, while Aule is desperately moving things aside so they won't get hurt when he releases the water back into the earth.
Yeah.
You know, so it's things like that. And it's because of this that the remaining 14 Valar, 15 plus Melkor, but the 14 Valar were afraid to use their power again, their full power. They won't again really intervene in the world in the way that they have now, because they've seen what they can do to it. That's why when Sauron in Lord of the Rings is at his doing his shit, he knows the Valar won't act against him directly because of this. That's why the Valar send like Gandalf to Middle Earth, so that they don't interfere directly, because it would end up destroying it. So the Valar saw that they needed to destroy the world that they'd come to create, and they were scared that they were going to wreck it, because their main job was to prepare it for the coming of the children of Eru Ilúvatar, the elves and the men. And they didn't know when they were coming, they didn't know where they were coming, only Eru knew that. So they knew they had to back off and leave things. So because of this, they left Middle-earth for Aman, which was a continent now in the west, because it had broken, right? The world had broken. And it was the end of the Spring of Arda. We can't have nice things. Melkor fucked it right up. They couldn't remove Melkor from Middle-earth, and so what they did instead was they fortified the western continent of Aman, and they raised mountains on the shore of the sea that were impassable apart from one pass, and it was called the Pelori Mountains. And Manwë set himself right on the highest point of this so that he and his wife Varda could look everywhere in the world, including east, back at Middle-earth. And it said that only the Valar knew how big the sea was between Aman and Middle-earth. So essentially, like, they choose who can come and who can't. And if Melkor tries to destroy them or come after them, he's got a whole mountain range that he won't be able to pass. And it's behind these mountains that the Valar, and it's quite a sad story, but it's all been a sad story, they gathered light and everything good about the world and tried to save it. And they tried to remake it again. And some things they made it even better, but they made it all in Aman, and in particular the region of Valinor. And in Valinor, they built their main city, which is called Valmar, which means City of Bells.
They like V, don't they?
They fucking do, my god. And at the western, so in the west of the west, in the western gate of Valmar, the City of Bells, in Valinor, which is in Aman, there was a hill called Ezelorhar, or corollary or corollary.
Oh, please.
It does. It's relax. You don't have to worry about that one. So basically, in Valinor, there is a hill. Right. That's it. That's as simple as it is. Right. In Valinor, there's a hill. And Yavanna, the woman responsible for growing things, sat for a long time on the hill, and she sang a song of power, and she poured all of her thoughts into growing into it. And another Valar called Nienna helped. She didn't speak. She stayed completely silent, but she cried and she wept and she poured her tears into the hill. So Yavanna sang her song and Nienna gave her tears. And the Valar all gathered to hear Yavanna sing. And it is said that in that hour, that this thing happened, the whole world was silent except for Yavanna singing. And as they watched, 2 saplings began to grow. And before their eyes, they grew into 2 gigantic trees that flowered. One of them was silver and called Telperion. The other one was gold and called Laurelin.
Why can't they just call it a gold tree and a silver tree? Jeez, why does everything have to have an extra name?
The real answer is that Tolkien wrote a fictional history. It's not really fantasy, it's a history. The meme answer is that, and this is quite amazing, I've never really mentioned this to you, but so many people use trees as an example with Tolkien of him going into so much description on everything. There's a line from Epic Rap Battle of History where it's like, we don't need the backstory on every fucking tree branch. The line's like, you went too deep, Professor Tweed Pants. We don't need the backstory on every fucking tree branch. And I have mentioned this tree before, actually, because Telperion is the ancestor of the White Tree of Gondor.
Yeah.
Which blooms when Aragorn becomes king again. But this, importantly, this is where the count of time begins. Time begins now. This is where the years start to be counted. This is called the year of the trees. And they're also called the days of bliss in Valinor. And shortly after this, somewhere right in the east of Middle-earth, in a place called Cuiveanen, the first elves get ready to wake up. The firstborn children of Ilúvatar. And that is where we're going to end today. Because that is we've seen the universe be created. We've then seen the world be created and broken. We've seen the first light of the world, of the lamps. We've seen their destruction. And now we've seen the new hope of the trees and the beginning of time. And out there somewhere, in the north of Middle-earth, being a cunt, is Melkor.
I was going to say, when you said these are the years of bliss, for how long?
For how long, indeed. His story's not end. Melkor's story's not ended yet. It's got a long way to go for Melkor. Not spoiler if you want to carry on with this thread of story, but I will say there's a bit of flip-flopping. There's a bit of flip-flopping from old Melkor. Because, you know, like I've said before, like Manwë and what have you, they don't really have a concept of pure evil or lying and stuff like that. So if Melkor says he's sorry, they're just alright, sound.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that one? Like we're getting I still think last episode was more complex. Talking about the Ainur.
It was, but I feel like there was. I don't know whether maybe I'm just super tired this week, but it felt like there was less names, or maybe the names just aren't sinking in this week. But I think when you're coming down to naming trees, there's an issue.
Well, yeah, true. I mean, what's not memorable about Telperion and Laurelin, or Iluin and Ormal? I mean, the fucking lamps had trees. I don't name my lamps. Just the lamp. I've got my favourite lamp is behind you.
The lamp, please.
The lamp, please. Stand back. No, my favourite lamp is that stag one we've got. And we've had it for years. I've never fucking named it. I just called it the lamp.
Well, why not?
I don't know. It's
Tolkien is asking, why not? You should. Do you know what? I bet he was like a Marie Kondo. You know how she respects everything and she like communicates with the object and sees if it sparks joy. I bet Tolkien was like early that he named everything because he respected everything.
Could you imagine, like, Edith, would you pass Helasio?
Yeah.
And she'll pass on the newspapers. No, you dumb cow. That's its cousin. I meant my book. No, apparently, I was reading actually an interview with. It was translated from Finnish, I think. So Tolkien and his wife had a nanny for their kids, and apparently Edith was a bit of a bastard, his wife. But I think they were just a bit like they were just oddballs. Fair fucking dudes, like. You know, I respect the man greatly, but you know, I don't know.
Well, there must be some insanity in this personality, really.
Yeah.
You don't get sort of fruitful, kind of information and adventure and mystery and like a lot of academics are eccentric, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Would you like your fun fact for the episode that's got nothing to do with the story that we've been telling so far?
Go on then.
This one I thought you might enjoy. There was a Queen of Gondor in the Third Age called Queen Beruthiel. She was a black Númenórean, i.e. one of the ones who worshipped Morgoth.
Okay.
And she was an absolute bastard. However, that's not the interesting part. She hated cats and tortured them, but she also trained them to be her spies, to the point where Gondorians would curse and spit if they ever saw cats. Eventually, she was exiled from Gondor and her name was stricken from the Book of Kings. And she was put in a ship and told to piss off. The last time her ship was ever seen, she wasn't ever seen again. The last time her ship was ever seen was passing Umbar, which was a settlement on the coast, and it was said that there was a cat. There was a cat at the prow, like at the wheel of the ship, and there was another cat sat on the figurehead, and that was the last anybody had ever seen of her.
So you're telling me that she was cannibalised by? Well, it's not cannibalised, but she was eaten by cats.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just telling you the fun fact of the last anyone ever saw of her ship was they saw cats on board, but she was never seen again. She might have went back to live in her in Ireland or wherever she was from, but
she might have just been having a nap.
Maybe, but that was the last.
And they're like the deckhand cats.
So she was stripped of. She was stricken from the records, from the Book of Kings, but people still remembered her. She was still told as a story. Aragorn remembered her, so it was. I think it was like in the year 900 of the Third Age.
That's clever though, having something that you hate as your spies, because they're disposable then, aren't they?
Well, she had.
You wouldn't be upset if you lost one.
So she had black cats as her spies, but she had a white cat that would spy on the black cats.
Oh Lord! So who spied on the white cat?
A Dulux.
And then who spied on the spy of the white cat of the black cats?
Topically, I watched a funny video about this earlier. A Dulux colour chart of cats. Each
it's
spying
like the
on
woman
the other.
who ate the fly.
Oh goodness me! But yeah, that was. I thought that was an interesting fact. Furthermore, it's the 25th of March when we're recording this, and as I sent to you earlier today, this is the day that the ring is destroyed.
Yeah.
In the Third Age, which is nice. Which means tomorrow
Should we celebrate with cake?
No, I'm full. Tomorrow, when it's my birthday, will be a good time to chill out because the ring's been destroyed for another year. We're fine.
Right, so this is like kind of like the bliss years.
The days of bliss.
Yeah.
The days of bliss. Yeah, but I think that was a good go in the story, and we'll sign off for now. That's it from me, Chris.
And goodbye from Rebecca. I'm off to have another slice of cake.
All right. Bye, everyone.